I still remember the moment when everything changed. It wasn't a huge dramatic event, but a quiet shift, a twist in fate that would unravel everything she thought she knew about herself. Ava Johnson wasn't someone who ever expected her life to be turned upside down. She was just a woman living her life, doing her best to navigate the world. She didn't expect a single night to alter her entire future. It all started when she met Ethan Wright, a man who would come into her life like a storm and leave with her heart and the weight of his secret. The night was like any other, a random encounter in a dimly lit bar where strangers crossed paths for fleeting moments. But for Ava, this moment wasn't fleeting. Ethan had a way of making her feel seen, in a world where she often felt invisible. There was something magnetic about him, a quiet confidence that drew her in. She didn't know much about him. He was just a man she met, someone who shared a brief conversation and a drink. But when he left that night, she never thought she'd see him again. Then, weeks later, Ava discovered something that shattered the little world she had carefully built. It started with a test, something as simple as a pregnancy test, but the results were undeniable. Ava was pregnant, and the man who was responsible was a mystery. The one-night stand with Ethan was just that, one night, one fleeting connection. She never expected it to be anything more. But fate had a funny way of changing the rules. As Ava processed the news, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random incident. Something about Ethan, something about the way he had made her feel, lingered in her thoughts. She had to know more. Days passed, and the uncertainty only grew. Ava knew she had to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Then one evening, she saw his face again, but this time, it wasn't in a bar, it was on a magazine cover. Ethan Wright wasn't just a random stranger. He was a billionaire, a hotel tycoon with an empire she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Ava's world shifted again, but this time, it wasn't with uncertainty, it was with shock. How had she gotten here? How had a single night with a man she barely knew led to this moment, where she was carrying the child of one of the wealthiest men in the country? She couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions, surprise, anger, confusion. She hadn't asked for this, but now, she had to face it. The reality of it all hit her hard. She wasn't just pregnant. She was pregnant by a billionaire, a man who had everything she didn't. What was she supposed to do now? I never imagined that a name I had never heard would change my life forever. Ethan Wright, the man I shared one night with, the man I thought was just a stranger, was suddenly thrust into my world like a force I couldn't ignore. The discovery that he was not just anyone but a billionaire hotel tycoon was overwhelming. But it wasn't just the money, the luxury, the power that had me reeling. It was the fact that I was carrying his child. How had I gotten here? How had I, Ava Johnson, a simple woman living an ordinary life, gotten tangled up with a man whose world was so far removed from mine? The reality of the situation settled in with a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't prepared to face a future that had been completely reshaped in an instant. I had always thought that if something like this happened to me, I would handle it with grace, but all I felt was panic. I thought about everything I had worked for, the job I loved, the life I built for myself, and suddenly, none of it seemed as important as the child growing inside me. I had so many questions. What did this mean for me? What did it mean for the baby? And what did it mean for Ethan? I had no idea how to approach him. He was a billionaire. He didn't need to be tied down to a woman like me. Yet, I couldn't help but think that he deserved to know. It was a sleepless night that followed. I spent hours tossing and turning, thinking about my options. I could keep the baby, raise it on my own, and deal with the fallout of it all. Or I could somehow contact Ethan and tell him the truth. But what would I say? How could I explain something so complicated to a man I hardly knew? The next day, I made the decision. I had to find him. I couldn't go on with the uncertainty. But when I showed up at his office, everything felt more surreal than I could have imagined. I walked into a massive, sleek building that screamed wealth and power. Everything about the place felt like it belonged to someone else, someone who existed in a world that had no room for me. Ethan's assistant led me into his office, and the moment I stepped inside, I saw him, Ethan Wright. He was sitting behind a massive desk, wearing a tailored suit that looked like it was made just for him. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. His gaze was piercing, intense, but there was something about it that softened when he saw me. I didn't know what to say, how to start. But before I could speak, Ethan stood up and walked around the desk to meet me. "Ava," he said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "What brings you here?" I took a deep breath, my heart racing in my chest. "Ethan, I paused, struggling to find the right words. "I need to talk to you. It's about what happened between us." His face remained unreadable as he motioned for me to sit down. "Go on," he said, his voice encouraging but still guarded. I hesitated for a moment, gathering my thoughts. "I'm pregnant, Ethan. It's yours," I finally said, the words hanging in the air between us. For a long moment, there was silence. I could see the shock flicker across his face, but it was quickly masked by that same cool, composed demeanor he always had. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice steady. "I'm sure," I replied. The words felt like a confession, but they also felt like the beginning of something I couldn't predict. Ethan stepped back, his gaze drifting to the large windows behind him. "This is unexpected," he said after a pause. "But it changes everything, doesn't it?" I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle deep in my chest. I didn't want this to be complicated, but I need to know what we're going to do next. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I sat across from Ethan, his gaze still intense, yet unreadable. The silence between us was suffocating, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. I hadn't expected this to be easy, but I also hadn't expected to feel so completely out of place. The walls of his office seemed to close in around me, the luxury of the space only emphasizing how far apart our worlds were. "What happens now?" I finally asked, my voice trembling slightly. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark hair, as if he were processing everything I had just said. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, but his expression remained carefully neutral. "You don't need to worry," he said after a moment, his voice steady but lacking any real warmth. "I'll take care of everything." Take care of everything. Those words should have reassured me, but they didn't. I wasn't looking for someone to take care of me. I needed something more: clarity, understanding, a decision about what the future held. I needed to know what role Ethan would play in this new life I was about to bring into the world. "What does that mean?" I asked, my eyes searching his face for any sign of sincerity. "I'm not some helpless woman, Ethan. I'm not asking for your charity. I'm asking for a partnership, for something real." Ethan's gaze softened for the briefest of moments, but he quickly masked it with the cool detachment that I had seen from him earlier. "I didn't mean it like that," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "What I'm offering is my support, my resources, everything you and the baby will need." I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. His offer sounded too much like a transaction, too much like I was just another part of his empire that he could manage, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. "I don't need your resources, Ethan," I said quietly, the words feeling heavier than I expected. "What I need is for you to be honest with me. I need you to tell me what kind of future you see for us, for me and this child." Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I wondered if he would just shut me out, like so many men in my past had done when things got too real. But then he surprised me. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk as he looked at me intently. "I'm not offering you just money," he said, his voice dropping slightly, as if the weight of the situation had finally settled on him as well. "I'm offering you my commitment to be part of your life, if that's what you want. But it's going to be complicated. My life is complicated." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard, and for the first time since I walked into his office, I felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as distant as I thought. "What are you asking from me, then?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking you to trust me," he said simply, his eyes searching mine. "I'm asking you to trust that I will do everything in my power to make sure this works, for all of us." The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine a life where Ethan and I could figure this out together. But I quickly pushed the thought away. I wasn't sure I could trust anyone, least of all a man who had the world at his feet and had been a complete stranger to me until recently. "I don't know if I can trust you, Ethan," I said, my voice low but firm. "But I will give this a chance, for the baby's sake." Ethan nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. "That's all I can ask for," he said. The weight of the decision was still heavy on my shoulders, but for the first time, I felt like there was a glimmer of possibility, something that could grow from the chaos of our initial meeting. Whether or not it would turn into something real, I didn't know. But I was willing to try, for the baby, and maybe, just maybe, for myself. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process everything that had happened. Ethan's offer, his words, they all swirled around me like a whirlwind, leaving me with more questions than answers. I hadn't expected him to be so honest, so vulnerable, but that didn't mean I was ready to trust him. He was a billionaire, a man who could have anything he wanted, and yet he was asking me to trust him. To trust him with a part of my life I wasn't sure I was ready to share. The morning after our meeting, I found myself sitting in a cafe, sipping on a coffee that had gone cold as my thoughts raced. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a moment, I debated ignoring it. But when I saw Ethan's name on the screen, I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. Taking a deep breath, I answered the call. Ava. His voice was steady, but there was an underlying tension I could hear. I know you need time, but I want to make sure you have everything you need. I've arranged for you to have access to a full medical team, and I've already contacted a lawyer who can help with any legal matters you might have. His words felt like a gesture of care, but also like a reminder of just how out of my depth I was. Ethan, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I appreciate it, but I'm not sure what you expect from me. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, it was with a calm resolve. What I expect is for you to allow me to be part of this, part of your life, part of the baby's life. I'm not asking for anything from you that you're not willing to give, but I do want to be there. You don't have to do this alone. His words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't used to depending on anyone, let alone a man I had only known for a few weeks. But in that moment, something in me softened. Maybe it was the reality of the situation settling in, or maybe it was the way he said it, like he truly meant it. I don't want to do this alone, I said, my voice breaking slightly. But I also don't want to just be a part of your world because it's convenient for you. It's not about convenience, Ethan replied, his tone gentle but firm. This is about us finding a way forward, together. And I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to make it work. For you. For the baby. The sincerity in his voice made something in my chest tighten, but I couldn't bring myself to fully let go of my doubts. I'm not ready to make any promises, I said, my words coming out carefully. I just need time to figure out what this means for me, for us. There was a brief silence before Ethan spoke again, his voice softening. Take all the time you need, Ava. I'm not going anywhere. But just know that I'm here. Whenever you're ready. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, trying to process what had just happened. Ethan was offering me a future, but was I ready to take it? Could I trust him? And more importantly, could I trust myself to make the right decision for the baby? The questions lingered, but for the first time in days, I didn't feel completely alone. I had no answers yet, but I knew I had to start somewhere. And for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Slowly, I began to accept that I couldn't navigate this alone, and that it was okay to let someone in, someone who, for better or worse, was now a part of my life, and the life of the baby growing inside me. I spent the next few weeks lost in a haze of uncertainty and small decisions that seemed to stack up, each one heavier than the last. Ethan's words still echoed in my mind, offering me everything I could possibly need. He promised support, stability, but the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could trust it. Could I trust him? Could I trust myself to make the right choice for the baby? The weight of those questions kept me up at night. I had no idea what life would look like with him in it, but part of me couldn't help but wonder if the life I had now was really the one I wanted. Ethan was patient. He didn't push. Each time I saw him, it was as if he was waiting for me to make a decision. He had set things in motion, appointments, lawyers, plans, but he never forced me to take any of it. And that was what scared me the most. In his silence, I heard a quiet promise, a reminder of the commitment he had made. Yet, I was still holding back. I didn't want to be another woman dependent on a man who had everything. I had spent my life working for my independence, and now I was being asked to let that go, to trust in someone who had so much power over my future. I didn't know if I could do that. But then there was the baby. That little life growing inside me was the one thing I knew for certain. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to think of the future, not just for me, but for the child who would need me to make the right choices. I needed to start being honest with myself. I needed to stop being afraid of the unknown. So, I made a decision. I called Ethan and asked him to meet me. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found him already waiting at the table, looking calm, composed, and entirely too perfect for my current state of mind. "Ava," he greeted me, his voice smooth, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of concern that wasn't there before. I took a deep breath and sat down across from him. "Ethan, I've been thinking. I don't know what this is, but I know I need to be a mother, and I need to do what's best for the baby." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "I don't want you to feel pressured, Ava. You have every right to make this decision for yourself. But I'm here, ready to stand by you, whatever you choose." His words, so simple and yet so profound, settled a bit of the turmoil in my heart. I didn't know what the future held, and I certainly didn't know if we could make this work, but I realized that I wasn't making this decision alone. Maybe that was enough. "I'm not asking for your life to change, Ava," he continued, his voice gentle, but insistent. "But I am asking for the chance to be part of this, part of your life, part of the baby's life. I can't imagine a future without that." It was the first time I truly understood what he meant. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about building something together, creating a future that was ours. For the first time, I felt a sense of possibility. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing in life ever was. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something I hadn't expected, something that could be beautiful in its own way. "Okay," I said softly, my heart beating faster now, as if I had finally made a choice. "I'll give this a chance. I'll give us a chance." Ethan's face softened, and for the first time, I saw something real in his eyes. It wasn't the calculated look of a businessman. It was the look of a man who was ready to take a risk for something that mattered. "Thank you, Ava," he said, his voice low. "This is more than I could have hoped for." As I sat there, in that moment, I realized that life didn't always go according to plan. Sometimes, it threw you into situations that made no sense, and you had to figure out how to move forward. And that's exactly what I was going to do. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't sure what to expect after that conversation with Ethan, but as the days went by, it felt like a new chapter was starting. We hadn't exactly figured everything out, but there was an unspoken understanding between us now. He was part of this, whether I was ready or not, and I was learning to accept that. But even as I allowed myself to think about the future, doubt still lingered in the back of my mind. Was I making the right choice? I hadn't known Ethan for long, and the idea of sharing my life with him, especially with the baby on the way, felt overwhelming. Yet, there was something in the way he treated me that made me wonder if we could make it work. He wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but maybe we could build something together. As time passed, things started falling into place. Ethan kept his word. He was there when I needed him, without being overbearing. He made sure I had access to the best medical care, and we started talking about plans for the baby. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people trying to figure out what came next. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when I doubted everything, when I felt like I was losing control of my life. I had always been independent, making my own decisions, charting my own course. Now, I was sharing those decisions with someone who, in many ways, was a stranger. A part of me feared that I was losing myself in all of this. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was at home, sitting in the living room, sorting through baby clothes I had bought, when Ethan called. I hadn't expected to hear from him so soon. He usually gave me space to breathe. But today his voice sounded different. "Ava, I need you to meet me at the hotel," he said, his tone serious. "There's something I need to discuss with you." I immediately felt a knot in my stomach. What was going on? I didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I replied. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I arrived at the hotel, a luxurious building that still made me feel like an outsider every time I stepped inside. Ethan was waiting in the lobby, dressed in his usual impeccable suit. But today, there was something else in his expression, a mixture of determination and anxiety that I hadn't seen before. "Ava," he greeted me, his voice low. "I've been thinking about everything. About the future, about us. I know we've barely started, but I can't keep pretending that I'm not invested in this. In you. In the baby." My heart skipped a beat, but I couldn't find the words to respond. I wasn't sure what he was going to say, but I could feel the weight of his words pressing against me. "I've made arrangements," Ethan continued, his gaze steady. "I've been working with my lawyer to ensure that everything is taken care of. I want you to be comfortable, to have everything you need." But I also want you to know that this is more than just about the baby. This is about us, too. I felt my breath catch in my throat. He wasn't just talking about the baby. He was talking about us, about what we could be together. The realization hit me like a wave. I had been so focused on the baby and the uncertainty of everything that I hadn't allowed myself to think about what this could mean for me personally. Was there a future here for us? Could I really see myself with Ethan, not just as a co-parent, but as something more? I didn't know, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep pretending that I wasn't invested in him too. I don't know what this will look like, Ethan, I said softly, my voice shaky. But I'm willing to try. For the baby, and for us. Ethan's eyes softened, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. That's all I need to hear, Ava, he said, his voice full of relief. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, we could walk it together. I was starting to see the changes, the subtle shifts in my world, but the uncertainty never fully left. Every day felt like a new chapter, one that I was writing with Ethan whether I was ready or not. He had been true to his word. He wasn't rushing me, but I could feel his presence in every aspect of my life now. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the relationship that was beginning to form, but I couldn't deny the pull between us. It was a quiet kind of power, a trust that was built slowly, piece by piece. The next few weeks passed in a blur of appointments, meetings, and decisions. Ethan was always there when I needed him, offering support without hesitation. I found myself looking forward to seeing him, not just as the father of my child, but as someone I was beginning to care about in ways I hadn't expected. But I couldn't help but wonder if I was just fooling myself. Was I truly falling for him? Or was I simply adjusting to the reality of being a mother with a man who seemed to have all the answers? The doubt still lingered, but I couldn't keep avoiding it. I had to face the truth. I needed to know if this was real. One evening, as we sat together in his apartment, I finally brought it up. Ethan, I started, my voice soft but steady. I've been thinking a lot. About everything. He looked at me, his expression patient, waiting for me to continue. I need to know if this is real. What are we doing here? What do you want from me? I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air, but I needed to ask. I needed to know. Ethan didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me, his gaze steady, searching my face as if he were reading my every thought. Then, slowly, he set his drink down and leaned forward. What I want, Ava, he said, his voice low, is you. Not just for the baby, not just because it's the right thing to do. I want you with everything I have. I can't promise that this will be easy, but I promise that I'll be here, with you, through every step. His words settled over me like a warm blanket, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel it, to feel what was growing between us. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't how I had imagined my life would go, but maybe it was better than I had expected. And what about everything else? I asked, still unsure if I was ready to believe it. What about your life, your empire? Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that made his eyes soften in a way that made my heart skip a beat. You are part of that now, Ava. The empire, the business, it's all part of who I am, but none of it matters if I don't have you. I want you in my life. I want you to be a part of everything. And the baby will be the center of it all. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say, how to respond. Part of me wanted to resist, to pull away from it all. But another part of me, the part that had been hiding behind walls for so long, wanted to give in. Maybe I could learn to trust him. Maybe I could learn to trust myself. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I'm scared, Ethan, I admitted. I'm scared of what this means, of what it could mean for me. For us. He reached out, his hand gently brushing mine, his touch warm and comforting. I know. I'm scared too. But that's the thing, Ava. We don't have to have everything figured out right now. We just have to be willing to take it one step at a time, together. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I realized that I wasn't alone in this. He was right. It wouldn't be easy, but maybe it was worth it. Maybe we could make this work, even with all the uncertainty, the fear, the unknown. We didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, it felt like we were heading in the right direction. I had always thought of myself as independent, self-sufficient even. But as the days passed, it became clear that I couldn't navigate this alone, not anymore. Ethan was there, every step of the way, making sure I had everything I needed. But it wasn't just about the baby. It was about us. A part of me still hesitated. I wanted to be strong, to prove I didn't need anyone else. But I was beginning to realize that strength didn't always mean doing things alone. Sometimes, it meant allowing others to help, to be there for you when you needed it most. As the weeks turned into months, I started to feel a shift in myself. The walls I had built around my heart slowly began to crumble. I wasn't sure if it was because of the baby, because of Ethan, or because of the fact that I was starting to understand that love wasn't a weakness. It wasn't about giving up your independence, but about sharing a part of yourself with someone who truly cared. One evening, as the sun began to set and the orange glow of twilight filled the room, Ethan and I sat together, discussing the plans for the baby. It was surreal, in a way. Two people who barely knew each other a few months ago, now planning a future for a child. There were still so many things we hadn't worked out, so many questions that remained unanswered. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. "Ava," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. "I know this hasn't been easy for you. I know it hasn't been easy for both of us. But I need you to know that I'm here. Whatever comes next, I'm in this with you." I looked at him, the man who had been a stranger to me just a short time ago, and for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. It was as if the pieces of my life were finally falling into place. I hadn't expected any of this, and yet, here we were, together. "I never thought I'd be here," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I'd be sitting here, planning a future with someone else. But I'm glad it's you." Ethan's eyes softened, and for a moment, there was no business, no empire, just the two of us, sitting in that quiet moment. "I'm glad too, Ava," he said, his voice sincere. "I'm glad it's you." In that moment, everything seemed clear. There would be challenges ahead, of course. We weren't fooling ourselves into thinking that everything would be perfect, but we were willing to face them, together. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel hopeful about what was to come. I could trust Ethan. I could trust that we were building something real. And maybe, just maybe, this unexpected journey would turn out to be everything I had ever needed. The baby, Ethan, us. This was my new reality, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that it could be enough. I had begun to think that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to settle into a rhythm. But life, as I was learning, didn't care about my plans. It didn't care how much I tried to control it or how hard I worked to make everything perfect. I still had moments when the weight of everything felt too much to bear. One evening, I found myself staring at the baby's ultrasound photo, the small image of a life I had yet to meet. And for the first time, I felt the overwhelming reality of what I was about to become, a mother. The thought terrified me. It wasn't that I wasn't excited. It was just that I had never imagined myself in this role. I had always been independent, always looked after myself, and now, I was going to be responsible for a little human. And then there was Ethan. He had been incredible. He was there for every appointment, every moment, asking questions, giving support, and all the while, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was holding back. I wasn't sure if I was ready to let him in completely, even though he had made it clear that he was here for the long haul. It wasn't that I didn't trust him. I did, in ways I hadn't expected. But trust wasn't the only thing that mattered in a relationship. Vulnerability, commitment, those were the things that scared me. What would it mean to let someone in completely? To share everything, all the insecurities, all the uncertainties, all the fears. Ethan had been patient with me, always giving me the space I needed, never pushing me to move faster than I was ready to. But I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I needed to confront my own doubts, to face the fear that had been holding me back. So one afternoon, I asked him to meet me at the cafe we had gone to on one of our first dates. It was a small place, quiet, familiar, and I knew it would give me the space I needed to say what had been on my mind. Ethan arrived a few minutes before I did, as always. He was seated at the same table we had shared months ago, his usual calm demeanor in place, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes as I sat down across from him. "Ava," he said, his voice soft but steady. "What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady the nervous energy swirling inside me. "I've been thinking a lot, Ethan. About us. About what comes next." I paused, looking at him, trying to read his expression. He didn't rush me. just waited for me to continue. I'm scared, I admitted finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared of what this means. Of letting go of everything I thought I knew. Of letting someone else in. Ethan's eyes softened, and he leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. Ava, I get it. I really do. I'm not asking you to let go of who you are. I'm not asking you to give up your independence. I'm asking you to trust that we can build something together. Something real. The sincerity in his voice made my heart race. But how do I do that? I whispered. How do I trust someone with my heart, with my life? Ethan reached across the table and took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. One step at a time, he said. We don't need to have everything figured out today or tomorrow. We just need to take it day by day and trust that we'll figure it out together. It was simple, but in that moment, it felt like the most powerful thing he could have said. I want to do this with you, I said, my voice steady now, the uncertainty slowly beginning to fade. I want to build this future with you, but I need to let go of my fear. Ethan smiled softly, his grip on my hand tightening just slightly. You don't have to let go of everything all at once, Ava. You don't have to be perfect. I'm here for you, no matter what. And just like that, I felt the weight in my chest lift. The fear didn't disappear, but it didn't feel as heavy. Maybe it was because I knew I wasn't facing it alone anymore. Maybe it was because, for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that there could be a future for us. A future that wasn't just about the baby, but about us as a family. We didn't have all the answers yet, and we never would. But I was starting to believe that it didn't matter. We would figure it out, together. I thought I had a grasp on everything. The plans, the future, my role as a mother. But with each passing day, I realized that life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. The baby was due soon, and the closer it got, the more real everything felt. I had moments of doubt, of fear, but I also had Ethan. I had him in a way that I never thought I would. Someone who was committed, someone who wanted to be part of this journey. As the months went by, I watched him carefully, trying to see if this was just a phase for him. Could he really handle this? Or would he eventually back out when things got too difficult? But every time I looked at him, I saw something I hadn't expected, genuine care. It wasn't just about the baby. It wasn't just about me. Ethan was here because he wanted to be. He wanted this life with me. As the baby's due date drew closer, I found myself torn. I wasn't sure what I expected from this relationship, or from life in general. But I knew one thing. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone. And maybe, just maybe, that someone could be Ethan. One evening, as I sat in the living room, sorting through baby clothes and imagining what life would look like once the baby was here, Ethan entered the room quietly. He had a small smile on his face, something I hadn't seen in a while. There was an ease to him that I hadn't noticed before. He walked over to me and crouched down beside the chair. Ava, he said softly, I've been thinking about how much everything has changed in such a short time. I know it's been overwhelming, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel any hesitation. For the first time, I realized that I wanted him to be a part of this, of my life, of the baby's life. I'm scared, Ethan, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can let go of my fears and trust that everything will be okay. Ethan placed a hand on mine, the warmth of his touch grounding me. I know, he said gently, and I don't expect you to have everything figured out. But I promise you that I'll be here every step of the way. We'll figure it out together. And you don't have to be perfect, Ava. You just have to be you. His words wrapped around me like a blanket, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to relax, to feel the weight of everything lift. I'm trying, I whispered, but I'm so scared that I'm not enough. Ethan's expression softened, and he leaned in closer, his forehead resting against mine. You're more than enough, Ava. You always have been. And in that moment, I knew that it wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about trusting in each other, and trusting that we could build something good, something real. The road ahead was still uncertain, and I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, I felt like I could face it. Not alone, but with Ethan by my side. And that thought was enough to make the uncertainty feel a little less heavy. We would take it one step at a time, together. I had never imagined that the moment of truth would come so quickly. The due date was fast approaching, and with it, the realization that everything was about to change in ways I couldn't fully predict. The house was quiet, too quiet. As I sat there staring at the baby clothes and toys, trying to prepare myself for the chaos and joy that would follow. Ethan had been a constant presence in my life since that night we decided to face the future together, and now, as the baby's arrival drew near, he was more present than ever. But still, the fear lingered. I wasn't sure if I was ready. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the responsibility of being a mother, for the commitment of sharing my life with someone else so completely. Could I do this? Could I really take this step into the unknown? I had no answers, but I knew one thing. Ethan was by my side. And that had to count for something. One afternoon, he arrived at the house, his presence immediately filling the room with a warmth I had grown accustomed to. There was something different about him that day, though, a nervous energy that hadn't been there before. He walked up to me, his expression serious but gentle. "Ava, I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady. "And I know we haven't discussed everything, but I want to be sure you know how much this means to me. To us. The baby. This is everything I've wanted." I looked at him, feeling a wave of emotion rush through me. The reality of everything that had been happening, everything we had been building, was finally hitting me. It wasn't just the baby. It was the future we were creating together. "Ethan, I'm scared," I admitted, my voice cracking with vulnerability. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything this will bring. I don't know if I'm ready for the responsibility, for the changes, for everything." He smiled softly and took my hand in his touch warm and comforting. "Ava, I know it's scary. I'm scared too, but I'm not going anywhere. We're doing this together, every step of the way. I believe in us." His words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't just promises. They were a reassurance that I wasn't alone in this. We were going to do this together, no matter how uncertain the road ahead might be. I took a deep breath, allowing myself to let go of some of the fear, just for a moment. "You're right," I whispered. "We're in this together." Ethan's expression softened as he gently brushed a lock of hair from my face. "And no matter what happens, Ava, I'll be here. This is my commitment to you, to the baby, to our future." The weight of his words settled into my chest, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe them fully. I wasn't alone in this. We weren't just two people going through the motions. We were building something real, something strong. The road ahead would be difficult, I knew that, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The fear didn't disappear, but it wasn't as overwhelming anymore. With Ethan by my side, I could face whatever was coming. "Thank you," I said softly, squeezing his hand. "I don't know what I would do without you." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "You'll never have to find out, Ava. We're in this together. Always." As I looked at him, the man who had come into my life unexpectedly and completely changed it, I realized that we didn't have all the answers, and we might never have all the answers. But what we had was enough. We had each other, and that was a start. I had no idea how much things would change in such a short time. The baby was now just a few weeks away, and with it came the reality of everything that had been building up. Ethan and I had spent months preparing for this moment, but the closer it got, the more I realized how much I still didn't know. I wasn't prepared for how much it would challenge me. Not just the physical demands of pregnancy, but the emotional ones. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I could handle it all on my own. But as the day drew nearer, I knew I couldn't do this without Ethan. He had been my rock in ways I hadn't expected. He wasn't perfect. None of us were. But he had shown me a side of myself I didn't know I had. He had shown me that it was okay to rely on someone else. It was okay to let go of the fear that had been holding me back for so long. And yet, I still found myself questioning everything. Was I ready for motherhood? Was I ready for this kind of change? I hadn't imagined any of this. I had never planned for a life like this. But somehow here I was, on the edge of a new chapter, one that I had to face head on. The night before the baby's due date, Ethan and I found ourselves sitting together in the living room. The house was quiet, the only sound being the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Ethan had his hand on mine, and for the first time, I felt the weight of everything that was about to happen. "Ava," he said quietly, his voice steady but with an undertone of emotion. "I know this hasn't been easy. I know it hasn't been perfect. But I want you to know that no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm here." His words filled the room, and for a moment, everything else faded away. I had heard them before, but tonight, they felt different. They felt like a promise I could hold on to. I'm scared, Ethan, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm scared of what tomorrow will bring, of what it means for us. Ethan squeezed my hand gently, his grip warm and reassuring. We're in this together, Ava. Every step. And I promise you, we'll get through this. His words, so simple and so certain, gave me the strength I hadn't realized I needed. I wasn't alone in this anymore. He was with me, and maybe that was all I needed to know. I took a deep breath, letting the fear settle in my chest for just a moment before exhaling it out. I don't know what the future holds, Ethan, I said softly, but I know I don't want to face it alone. He smiled, the weight of his gaze steady and comforting. You never will, Ava. I'm here for you. We're doing this together, no matter what. I nodded, feeling the heaviness lift just a little. There was still uncertainty, of course. There was still fear. But in that moment, I realized that it didn't matter. Whatever happened next, I wasn't alone. Ethan was right beside me, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel a sense of peace. Maybe we didn't have all the answers, and maybe the road ahead would be difficult, but together, we would face it. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. I had always known that life would change once the baby arrived, but nothing could have prepared me for the overwhelming emotions that came with it. The day finally came, and Ethan and I found ourselves in the hospital, waiting for something we had both been anticipating. I was nervous, excited, terrified, all at once. It was a moment that felt both like the beginning of a new chapter and the end of the old. Ethan stood beside me, his hand on mine, his touch grounding me in a way that no one else could. It's going to be okay, he said softly, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. I nodded, trying to push the anxiety away, but it wasn't easy. The contractions were getting stronger, and I could feel the exhaustion setting in. It was hard to focus, hard to think about anything except the pain and the fear of the unknown. But through it all, Ethan was there. He never left my side, never faltered in his support. His calm presence made me believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. The hours seemed to stretch on forever, and the pain was almost unbearable at times. But eventually, the waiting was over. I heard the sound of the baby's first cry, and in that moment, everything changed. The relief, the joy, the pure, overwhelming emotion, it hit me all at once. I held our baby for the first time, feeling a bond stronger than anything I had ever known. Ethan's eyes were filled with tears as he looked at the tiny little person we had created together. She's perfect, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. I couldn't help but smile, my heart swelling with love for this little life in my arms. In that moment, everything else faded away. All the doubts, all the fears, they seemed so insignificant now. We had created something beautiful together. We were a family. The journey that had brought us here had been difficult, full of uncertainty, but it had also been full of love and growth. We had faced the unknown together, and now, here we were, stronger, more connected, and more ready for the future than I had ever thought possible. As I looked at Ethan, the man who had been with me through it all, I realized that this was just the beginning of a new life, a new chapter, and a new kind of love that I never could have imagined before. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that everything would be okay. Together, we would face whatever came next. We would build this life, our life, one step at a time.